They laugh. You laugh. Everyone repeats it like a ritual nobody questions. But notice this. The person who starts the laughter isn't doing it for fun. They're testing control. One subtle pause, a shift in tone, a glance, and suddenly the room bends. Most people call it charm or charisma. You know it's something else. It's a hidden mechanism, quietly teaching who obeys and who resists. Today, you'll see it.
The pattern that runs beneath every conversation, every joke, every decision you thought was free. And once you recognize it, you can't unsee it.
You've always assumed people act freely at work. You show up, do your tasks, interact with colleagues, and think it's all choice. But here's the quiet truth. Most behaviors are guided before you even notice. Take the open office, for example. Desks arranged in grids, screens visible, conversations half-heard. It's not just design, it's control. Every movement, every glance subtly signals who belongs, who follows, who hesitates.
Remember Emily, the new hire who laughed at the manager's offhand joke? She thought it was natural, but every chuckle, every nod was mapped against a hidden script. Compliance isn't shouted, it's trained. And once it's embedded, deviation feels uncomfortable, even wrong. Now look outside the office. In grocery stores, placement is never random.
Eye-level shelves, popular tags, checkout displays. They're invisible nudges, nudges most never notice. You think you're choosing, you aren't. The mechanism is the same: subtle cues, repeated patterns, immediate social feedback. Your brain registers them as normal, even pleasurable, long before conscious thought catches up. Even in childhood, these scripts start. Teachers reward some behaviors, ignore others. Playground hierarchies form silently: who sits where, who speaks when, who gets laughed at or followed. Each interaction layers an invisible instruction manual for navigating the world. By adulthood, the patterns feel instinctive, unchangeable. Here's the inversion you'll need for part 2. What you believe is free choice, the laughter, the purchase, the obedience, is actually the result of deliberate design. Most people never see the strings. They assume comfort equals consent, and yet every day they repeat behaviors coded long ago, unaware of the hidden mechanisms shaping every action. The real power isn't in overt control, it's in subtle repetition. Not in who shouts the loudest, but in who quietly programs the environment so others follow without thinking. Watch closely. Observe the pauses, the glances, the little acknowledgments. Those are the fingerprints of influence. And once you recognize them, everything you thought was casual or spontaneous suddenly becomes visible, manipulable, measurable. By the end of this video, you'll start seeing these patterns everywhere: the office, the store, the classroom, the social feed. And when you do, you'll realize that most people don't act freely at all. They act predictably because they've been shown, slowly and invisibly, exactly how to behave.
Most people think influence is obvious. You see a boss giving orders, a friend persuading you, an ad pushing a product, and you assume the power is in the loudest voice, the flashiest display, the cleverest line. You think resistance is choice, but it isn't. Take social media. Everyone scrolls, clicks, likes, comments, believing it's personal preference. You think you're deciding.
But notice the patterns. Trending posts, algorithmic nudges, notifications timed to break focus. Each interaction subtly shapes your attention, your mood, your judgments, long before you realize you're being guided. You scroll, not because you want to, but because the system trained you to. Even relationships mirror this. That friend who always knows what you need isn't just empathetic. They've learned, consciously or unconsciously, how to elicit responses. Small cues, timed compliments, strategic silences. You perceive it as warmth, choice, or connection. In reality, it's subtle influence mapped over repeated interactions. You think it's spontaneous. It's designed. Here's why this inversion exists. Humans crave predictability. Your brain prefers patterns over uncertainty.
The system, whether social, digital, or interpersonal, leverages that instinct. Predictable behavior is easier to guide, easier to measure, easier to control. And the moment you feel comfortable, that's when compliance is strongest. You're relaxed, unguarded, unaware. Comfort is the camouflage of control. Now, make it personal. Think of the last time you laughed at a joke you didn't even find funny, or bought something you didn't need. Most likely, it wasn't a mistake. It was a tiny intersection of cues, repetition, and expectation, a hidden choreography. You felt free, but your choices were preconditioned. That's the power most never recognize. The moment you assume you're acting freely, you're most vulnerable to influence. By understanding this flip, you gain an edge.
Seeing influence not as an external force, but as an invisible architecture around you, allows you to spot the threads, anticipate the pulls, and reclaim mental space. You realize that what feels natural, your reactions, your decisions, even your likes, can be dissected, predicted, and subtly guided. The world isn't full of overt manipulators. It's full of invisible systems teaching everyone to act, respond, and comply without ever announcing themselves. Once you recognize that, everything you believed about free choice starts to wobble. And the more you observe, the more you notice the layers beneath the surface, the hidden scripts everyone follows, willingly or not. You've noticed it, haven't you? That flicker in a conversation, the little nudge that shifts behavior without warning. Most ignore it, assume it's normal. But you don't. You're starting to see the invisible patterns others follow blindly. The signals, the pauses, the tiny approvals, they're everywhere. Recognizing them isn't luck, it's clarity. And clarity is the first step toward control. The moment most will never reach.
Dominance rarely announces itself. It creeps in through small, seemingly irrelevant acts. Who speaks first? Who interrupts? Who subtly corrects? Who waits? Watch a team meeting. The person who asks the first question, who positions their ideas early, sets the invisible hierarchy. Others follow, not out of respect, not out of admiration, but because the environment signals compliance. Consider Marcus, a mid-level manager. He doesn't yell or threaten. He smiles, leans forward, nods at certain comments, ignores others. Slowly, his preferences become the default. Employees adopt them automatically: who to approach, what ideas to prioritize, even what tone to use. One subtle glance, one brief acknowledgement, one strategically timed silence, and the room reorganizes itself around him. You might think it's charisma, but it's method. Power isn't about who wins debates.
It's about who scripts the context. The person who shapes the space, even invisibly, dictates behavior. Miss it, and you become predictable, readable, exploitable. Ignore it, and you're always reacting, never leading. Now, scale it down to personal interactions. A friend, a coworker. Observe micro-dominance. Who decides the timing of conversations? Who reframes arguments subtly? Who elicits concessions without asking?
The cause-effect is simple. Small, repeated actions condition behavior. The consequence of ignorance? You comply without realizing it, thinking it was your choice. This isn't abstract. Every office, every household, every social circle contains these layers. Recognizing the mechanism, how tiny gestures accumulate into control, changes everything. You start to see who is merely participating and who is orchestrating. You notice the micro-habits that cement dominance: approving, interrupting, praising selectively, waiting strategically. By observing these dynamics, you gain leverage. Not by confrontation, not by rebellion, but by understanding the rules others follow blindly. Once you can trace the path from gesture to behavior to compliance, you can predict moves, anticipate reactions, and carve influence where others assume chaos.
The quiet manipulators are everywhere. The difference between being guided and guiding is noticing what most miss and acting on it. Dominance and influence aren't just about external control. They operate inside your mind, quietly shaping perception. Every decision you think is conscious is filtered through layers of preconditioned responses. Your attention, your focus, even your emotional reactions are sculpted by mechanisms most never notice. Take media consumption. Headlines, images, phrasing, they don't merely inform. They prime thoughts, anchor emotions, and normalize assumptions. One image, one phrase repeated subtly across platforms nudges judgment before reasoning can catch up. You don't just see the world, you're trained to interpret it in patterns someone else designed. The same applies in groups. Peer reactions, applause, laughter, or even silence, these are invisible feedback loops.
They reinforce behavior, quietly punishing deviation and rewarding compliance. Over time, what feels instinctive is actually a chain of responses conditioned by observation, repetition, and social pressure. Here's the self-recognition trigger. Look at your own habits. The ideas you adopt without questioning, the choices you assume are free, the preferences that seem innate. How many are genuinely yours, and how many are the echo of repeated nudges? Once you can trace these threads, you begin to see the architecture beneath everyday life. Systems aren't neutral. Corporations, social networks, governments, even friend groups, they thrive on predictability.
The more predictable the masses, the easier to influence, measure, and exploit. Every subtle design, every repeated cue, every small social signal contributes to a network of control. Ignoring it keeps you a passive participant. Recognizing it gives you leverage. This level of insight changes perception permanently. The pause in conversation, the choice of words, the layout of a room, the timing of posts, everything becomes data, every interaction a signal. You start reading the invisible instructions others follow blindly. And when you notice them, you gain a kind of power that's rarely acknowledged, the ability to anticipate, adapt, and, if needed, redirect. Understanding the mechanism behind the mechanism is uncomfortable. It forces you to confront the fact that much of what feels natural, your decisions, your behaviors, even your emotions, is shaped. But discomfort is necessary, because once you see the structure, the patterns, the hidden scripts, the world stops being a chaotic space of choices. It becomes a map, a system you can navigate with awareness, strategy, and control.
You feel it now, that subtle unease as patterns you trusted reveal themselves. It's unsettling because the rules you relied on were never yours. Every interaction, every choice, every free decision carries invisible weight. Most will ignore it, dismiss it, or rationalize it away. But you don't. And by the end of this video, you'll see how these hidden currents aren't just shaping others, they're shaping you too.
Power isn't always visible. It's rarely raw force. More often, it's subtle, weaponized through systems, relationships, and habits. Companies track attention, monitor engagement, measure reactions, then adjust every tiny variable to guide behavior. Social networks, friend groups, even families unconsciously reinforce scripts, rewarding compliance and punishing deviation. Most never notice. They think it's life. You know better.
Consider dating dynamics. The person who controls tempo, who texts first, who waits, who withdraws subtly, sets the emotional standard. You react, not because you want to, but because the system they've built around you triggers predictable responses. Every pause, every compliment, every absence is a lever. Compliance is invisible. And the cost? Your decisions, your time, your emotional energy slowly redirected without consent. On a larger scale, governments and corporations weaponize the same patterns. Policies, product placements, marketing campaigns, they shape perception long before dialogue or debate happens. By the time most notice, their behavior is already aligned with someone else's objectives. Subtle erosion is powerful because it feels natural. Comfort masks manipulation. Familiarity masks control. Awareness is the edge.
Recognizing these hidden systems doesn't make you invincible, but it makes you conscious. Once you see the levers, the nudges, the silent orchestration, you can navigate strategically. You can choose when to follow, when to resist, when to step back. Awareness turns compliance into leverage, vulnerability into insight. The danger is not external, it's internal. Ignorance allows systems to shape you passively.
Observation allows you to turn influence into understanding, frustration into clarity. The dark side is unavoidable. The integration is optional. Recognize the scripts, trace the nudges, note the patterns, and you gain control most never grasp. The world isn't changed by force. It's changed by understanding the architecture of obedience. The final shift isn't about domination over others. It's about mastery over perception.
Once you internalize these patterns, everything you thought was spontaneous becomes measurable. Every laugh, every glance, every small decision becomes data. And when you use that awareness, you step out of the guided flow and into a space where choice is no longer assumed, but reclaimed. Everything you've seen, the subtle pauses, the hidden cues, the invisible scripts, wasn't random. The patterns you once ignored aren't mistakes or coincidences. They're deliberate. And the more you observe, the more you realize that freedom is rarely given. It's noticed, claimed, and mentally taken. Your mind is the arena. Every glance, every gesture, every choice is part of a system quietly shaping behavior. Awareness isn't passive.
It isn't theory, it's leverage. The moment you see the currents others blindly follow, you gain control over what was previously invisible. You can anticipate, navigate, and, if necessary, redirect outcomes without announcing your hand. But this isn't about power over others. It's about power over yourself. Understanding the mechanics of influence, the architecture of compliance, and the hidden levers of behavior rewires your perception.
You no longer assume choice. You measure it. You no longer follow blindly. You decide deliberately. Notice it. Apply it. Internalize it. The world will keep operating under the same invisible rules, but you won't be operating blindly within them anymore. You will see what most never see. You will understand what most cannot name. And once that clarity takes hold, your actions, your decisions, and your influence become your own, fully reclaimed.
Power is never given. It's never negotiated. It's taken mentally, through observation, recognition, and unwavering awareness. And the first step is simple. Start noticing. Everything else follows.